November is Adoption Awareness Month, and I think that there are so many different kinds of adoptions out there, and there's so much information that people aren't aware of, that it's really important to make it known, maybe get the wording correct. I know there's a lot of phrases out there that have been floating around for years that are probably not appropriate. And there's a lot of information, a lot of details that I've found throughout the years that people are just unaware of.
You think you know what you want as a red-blooded male, and that's why men should get married, is because they know better. And so
They being us?
women, that's correct.
Got that, right? Okay.
Well, you do, because as soon as now that I'm into it up to my eyeballs, okay, of course it's worth it. Very difficult. If we knew, like touching on the financials, well, that falls on my shoulders, and that is tough. There's nothing easy about that. But there was divine help where the playing field had been leveled.
Some of the things I think we have is the fact that adoption's easy. That's I think one of the biggest myths. People go, oh, you're going to have children the easy way, And I think, oh, if you only knew that it's a process. It's a long process. It's emotional. It's challenging. And I've spoken to somebody just last week in the doctor's office, and it was an older gentleman who had said they had, started the process to adopt, and they gave up because it was just such a challenge that they just thought that wasn't the route they could do. It was just too hard. Another myth might be people considering, the costs. I touched on that. It can put a strain on families just to, could families adopt more? Would there be more families doing it if it was more affordable? I believe so. It's one of those things that I think it was always on my heart a little bit. I just never pinpointed exactly that it was adoption. I just knew that there was always these children out there that needed love. Didn't know how much it would kind of intertwine with our lives personally until we started struggling with infertility. So it kind of brought adoption to the forefront. We eventually went down the private adoption path. We had looked at a couple of other options too, but that's the one we chose. And we chose to do that after about 7.5 years of, looking into it, maybe waiting till Bernie was on board completely.
I guess in our education we learn there's always a dragger and then a draggy. And I'd say I was the draggy. Mm-hmm. I'd say you'd have to bring me along. I was a typical red-blooded male. And so I enjoyed my recreational activities. And so not having children, I had a lot of free time, and I enjoyed that. There was a few different avenues where I was difficult. Yeah, it was pretty difficult. And then, like I say, at the end of the day, if we were not going to parent, that was, I don't want to say okay with me, but I was okay with that.
I didn't want to push. I didn't want to push or pull too hard, so I waited and prayed because we wanted the right path. And I wanted to make sure that we both wanted the same thing. And as soon as he gave the go-ahead, we jumped in with all 4 feet. With most of the adoptions that are available to us, there's a considerable fees involved. And that's a strain on families a lot of places because, do you go all out and go to an international adoption and, maybe mortgage your house to make it happen? Do you hold fundraisers for a year or two to make it happen? Do you try to go locally where there's very few children for adoption, and do you try to, just save the money and do it? So there's a lot of consideration to the costs, and I think in his case, that was a stumbling block for sure, was the finances, right? What do we do? Do we put out all this money and then still have no guarantee of a family?
Yes, I was a little resentful because everybody's being able to have children and families the free and fun way. And here we are having to write out checks for it. So there's how can you not be? I mean, it's to stare at a $20,000 line of credit for a couple of years and all you can do is pay the interest is definitely not in the fine print of adopting. But now when you have the child in front of you and you're playing cars with them, that's okay. That's not even on the radar.
And we found a few people who have really been reserved to the idea of having an open adoption, which is what we had pursued, and successfully have 2 private open adoptions, which means that you have an open relationship with the birth family, or at least the birth mother. And we found a few people, and I think at the beginning, Bernie would probably agree to this, he was very resistant to that idea. After being through it, we're thinking, how can you not? Like, the gift is so amazing. They chose you. Like, the birth mom chose you to be their parents. Like that's such an amazing gift, and how do you not want them in your life? But it's just people not knowing what they will be capable of when they're faced with it. I think one of the hardest parts that comes in afterwards is the waiting. And a year goes by, and now you're paying more fees to try to stay in the box and have, stay active, and hopefully, just hopefully, somebody chooses you. And it's a roller coaster, and people will constantly say something along the lines of, oh, those children are so lucky to have you, or they're so lucky they got adopted. And we continuously say how lucky we are. We're reminded every single day when we get the cuddles and the hugs, and we see the walking and the talking, and we see all the milestones. Then we know every moment how lucky we are. We get to see these smiles and get the hugs around the neck and the kisses and the cuddles, and we get to be called mommy and daddy. So when you hear a comment like, go get one of those free kids, of course my initial reaction is to enlighten them a little. There's not free kids out there, so to speak. Now, I think that what he was referring to is, back, many years ago, you could just go through CFS and adopt, and away you go. But again, people aren't aware that that process has changed considerably too. When we started the process, it was a 10-year wait through CFS to have a healthy infant placed with you. And I know that increased to at least 15 years. And people who waited and they still never get the call. It had been just over 2 years of waiting, and I think you start to lose a little bit of hope along the way. But, we just continued to pray that God knew. God knows what child is for us, and God knows if this is the way we're supposed to be parents. And so we got the call, and we got the call saying, there's a birth mom who's chosen you. Can you come in and meet her? And so this was happening. Like, this was real. This is what they talked about. This is what they prepare you for. So away we went to our first meeting, and we met with the birth mom and the birth grandma. And we were to come prepared also with names. And so we sat in our first visit, and it was just so surreal. You have a mom who, we're picking names together, and so that was a pretty high point in the whole process. And I know the names we had chosen, the birth grandma had pointed out, she felt very led that we were the right family. She felt that God had definitely lined us up for this grandchild, and she knew confirmation-wise too, because the girl's name we chose had been a birth grandma's name, and the boy's name we had chose was a birth grandpa's name. So she felt even more confirmation that we were the family. I was at work, and I got the phone call saying, the baby's born, it's a baby girl, and her name's Isabella Jewel, which was the name we had chosen. And so the worker said, that's a good sign. She chose the name that you picked, so this is a good sign. And through the adoption process, there are many times where the birth mom has to recommit to her process.
After the initial phone call that the baby was born, I think there was about 48 hours of nothing. And Tina and I, and the sickest feeling came over us. She changed her mind.
We did get the call to say that she had reversed her decision. And I got that call while I was at work and worked at a quiet place. So I got the call saying she's going home with her baby. And I remember going into the bathroom and crying hysterically and wiping away the tears, looking in the mirror and saying, God, this is your plan. It's your plan. Like, if this child's not meant for us, they're not meant for us, and I want what you want. And dried the tears, and then tried to serve customers for the rest of the day. The next number of days were up and down every day. We were getting reports from workers, and I can't say enough good things about adoption options and the care they give to the parents and the sensitivity. And they kept us posted. And by day 7, Isabella Jewel was in our arms.
So before we even got the call, I remember I had a confident feeling that the child was coming to our home before we even got the phone call to say, come pick it up.
After the 21 days, we were a family, and it was amazing, of course, something we'd always wondered what it would be like to finally be mom and dad. We had that decision to make. Do we want to just be parents of one child? Do we have a chance of getting another child? What are our avenues? What type of adoption can we do? What can we afford? So we chose to reapply at the private agency, knowing our odds were probably a lot less because we already had been chosen. But we thought, it's worth a try. We would like Isabella to have a sibling. And as she kind of got older, she would ask almost daily for a sibling. Back in the system, and 4 years pass and no phone calls. We're renewing every year. You're redoing your criminal record checks, your child abuse registry checks. You're paying the fees to update every single year.
But we were pretty happy just having the one, and then it was literally right out of left field. I got a phone call saying, Bernie, are you happy with us showing your file to a mother with,
It's a close
there was a few, it's a close match. It's not exact, but it's close. Can we show her your file?
Here's the difference.
There's a few differences, and they talked us through that. I said, yeah, go ahead, sure, no problem. And she said, okay, well, we already did. And she picked you. And I was like, what?
We had to go in right away, and that process from beginning to end, from the call to when Riley was in our home, was 5 days. Then the 21 days began again, and you have that sitting on the edge of your seat.
The second adoption was a little different because the mother, she had let us know she knew it was a boy. She said when she found out she knew what she was having, she says, well, I had a boy first. I have a boy already. And so I thought, oh, here it comes, a girl. And she said, no, and I'm having another boy now. And then that was a little bit of waterworks happened there.
They have way better genetics than we could have given them. So I think what we've learned most through all of this is if there's a mom out there who, is faced with a decision to make, they have control. They can choose a family that they are satisfied with. They can choose a family who meets criteria that they value. And they can have a relationship with that child still. They can still choose to have pictures, photos, updates. They can choose to have visits. They can choose to be a part of the adoptive family. We have family visits with the birth family, not just the birth mom. And we feel like they're extended family to us. I stood up in church once and said this, and I think the greatest thing about being a parent is I'm the one they come to when they fall and get boo-boos. I'm the one who they come to when they need the cuddles and the love and the kisses. I was always an auntie that, was a good auntie, but it's different when they are the ones who are choosing you.
This might sound goofy, but it's not. I hope you get the point. But my daughter I would be reading her a story in bed, and she would say, Dad, sometimes I think you're a blue bomber and or a Winnipeg Jet. And obviously the point is that she sees me the way she sees, like when I would take her to a game. She's impressed by those people, those athletes. And so she's equally impressed by me. And that's the coolest thing to be.